record on this computer. Huh. All right. It didn't announce that we're recording, but know that we're recording it now. So let's go back. Let's go back to the photo that we're looking at, and just based on what we learned. You can't see my screen anymore now, can you? So let's share screen again. Let's go in one step. No. You're still there, right? In one step, how can we show that this is going to look like crap in any publication? Anybody want to share it quick?
Did you ask how would you know?
Yeah, how it was, besides looking at the picture, how can we definitively and quantitatively say that this picture is going to look bad?
The histogram.
So if I look at the so that's a good starting point. If I look at the histogram, so image adjust levels, what I see on the root level with RGB all combined is that there is a solid black, but it spikes at black, and there is a white. It goes all the way down to white. When I look at the individual channels, they don't seem terribly out of whack, except for blue, and that looks a little weird. If you're familiar with, once you start seeing histograms a lot. One thing you should note about the histogram is notice that it peaks and then goes off the chart before it hits the end. That's almost always bad. Almost always, not always, but almost always bad. Okay, so we didn't learn all that much from the histogram.
You could also use the eyedropper tool to go over the skin.
Okay, so that's where I would start. Thank you. I click on my eyedropper tool, make sure it's on 3x3 or 5x5, so I'm not looking at an errant pixel. And then I find the properly exposed skin tone of a center of visual interest, and I look at her cheek, say for example, and look at what I see in the info palette. I see cyan 18, magenta 34, yellow 76, and K1. What's wrong with that?
Too much yellow.
Like abnormally wrong, something's bad, right? Now, the photographer might come back and say, oh, it was taken during the golden hour. I'm like, oh, I don't know about that, because those shadows aren't quite long enough to be the golden hour. And even then, you're pushing it, right?
But I have a question, because I've always wondered about that is, a lot of my first period, for example, shoots during that time period.
Sure.
So are you actually, would you drain the yellow out of it?
No, absolutely not.
Okay, I didn't think so. I just wanted to check.
No, and which is another reason that I think photographers should be doing their own color correction, right? But there's other reasons that we can tell that this one's blown out. If we looked at the highlights, look at the highlights. The white shirt is 12,990. The black shorts, 62, 71, 70, 81, right? Which that's just weird, right? So the numbers are just weird, right? And it's the weirdness that I'm really looking at here. But just look at what happens when I just apply a blue photo filter to take out some of that yellow, right? And I'm going to go all the way up to 35. Now, which looks better, after or before? Before or after?
I don't know, it feels a little blue to me.
It looks good. I like it. Yeah, right.
I like the
I think
after.
after. Yeah.
So to me, the skin tones, now again, I don't know what your monitors are saying, but look at the values. We're still way too yellow anywhere. Now, we don't know what their skin tones were like, right? So we're color correcting in the blind, but there on her knee, I'm approaching reality. And I'm with you in saying I wouldn't probably go any further than this, but considering that we started there, wow, I was messing with this photo earlier. I also kind of said, well, if it's oversaturated, what happens if I just if I desaturate it a little bit? And even if that's all I do, look at how I can improve the skin tones. Just the skin tones now, don't look at everything else, right? Because now it's starting to look flat, right?
Yeah, it's starting to look faded out.
Yeah, and it is looking faded out, right? Because I'm moving in that direction.
Yeah.
So anyway, that was just an example of something that we saw in the critique. I'm like, wow, especially this one. That one's just way too hot. And then this one, no highlights, no shadows. This one's actually not that bad. The skin tone's there. It's not a great picture, but not that bad. And then this one was back to being blown out again. So I thought we would talk about that. All right. So now that said, tonight I want to review. Last week we did this picture, right? We started here. Here's where we started, and here's what we did with color correction. We took this picture, here's where we started, and here's where we ended up with color correction. Here's where we started on this picture. Here's where we started on this picture, and here's where we ended up with color correction. Right. So we learned a pretty fast and tried and true method of doing color correction. So I'm actually going to start with this one this week, and I'm just going to run through it really fast, just to review, and then we're going to go back and do another picture and let you have lots of time for questions. Right. First of all, everybody admit this is a crappy picture.
Yes.
Yeah.
Right, there we go, bingo. All right, so sometimes you get crappy pictures and you've got to turn them into something usable, right? I mean, that's just life. Now, let's hope that it's not going to be in the yearbook or even in the newspaper because it's pretty blurry and maybe we're going to try to go for this guy, et cetera. But okay, so we're going to do what we can do. So step one was what? I love the handout that had the C's on it. What's the first C? We've already done the culling and the cutting the crap and all that. So what's the next C? Hint?
Cropping.
Crop. All right. So I'm going to take this picture and I'm going to try to crop it so that the horizon line is parallel with the edge of the frame. Now, when I do that rotated crop, obviously I lose a lot of the picture, right? So I got to make decisions about what to keep and what not to keep, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Again, we're trying to take a bad situation and make it salvageable, right? Once I've got the crop, I might move it around and see if there's a better way to do it, but I definitely don't like that light in it. So we're just going to deal with it, right? We can slide it down the axis and we're going to go for here. All right, now what? This is one of those pictures that I said, if it's just the white balance, give auto color a try. The picture's already crappy. The picture's already crappy. You probably aren't going to make it much worse by trying one of those auto functions, right? But I wanted to show you something else tonight that's a really fast way to get rid of just overall white balance problems. And this is something we used to teach as the first step of every single color correction, but we really kind of skip it now. But this is a great example of when it's going to work, I hope. You go to image adjust levels, and just like we did before, when we look at the overall histogram, we see the shadows, the midtones, and the highlights, and they're there. We've got shadows and midtones and highlights. We've got a black, we've got a white, nothing goes off the chart. So the histogram looks relatively decent. But when we drill down, we see that there's no red in the blacks. So we simply pull that slider over and we do the same thing to white to get some red into the whites. Same thing with green. Green's not a particular problem here. There's lots of green in the picture. But look at the blue channel. In the blue channel, because this picture is so yellow, remember blue and yellow are opposite each other? So now we have to make decisions. Is this fake data or is it real data? And so I just pull my slider over and I check my numbers. Now look at where I was before. I was at 2261 and now I'm at 2831. So just by doing this one little color correction here, I've gone from that to that, right? And the beauty of doing it this way is I've maintained the relative balance of all of the colors in the picture. Right? So far, so good, right? So image adjust levels. And this is not a bad thing to teach students to do on every single photo. You almost cannot hurt a photo unless there's no white or black in the photo, I should warn you, right? Like if the photo was taken by stage lights or candlelight or underwater where there is no black and white, this will not work. But if there is supposed to be a black and there is supposed to be a white in the picture, this is one way to get at it. You just go to each individual level, pull the sliders in, not the midtone slider, just the highlights and shadow slider. And sometimes you have to make determinations. All right. Another way to do that exact same thing, so I use my history palette, whoops, and I go back, is to do image adjust levels, same palette, except click on the white eyedropper and then go find what's supposed to be white and define it as white. All right. Then do the same thing with black. Go find something that's supposed to be black and define it as black. Right? And you can do the same thing with gray if you want to. So my problem with doing it that way is I just think there's a lot more subjectivity in there by doing it that way, right? Again, like we learned last week, there's many, many ways, at least 3 ways to get to everything, right? The point is what we're trying to get to is making sure that the properly exposed skin tones have an M and Y value that is about the same within 3 or 4 points. And the K value for an average white person's skin tone is in the low 30s. And then as skin tones go up darker, they just get darker and darker and darker. So low 30s on the K value, M and Y about the same. So really with one step, after we crop this picture, we're done color correcting this picture, right? So it's pretty straightforward and easy, which is why once we teach our photographers how to do it, we let all of our photographers do color correction after we've taught them how to do it. Initially, we don't, for obvious reasons. And then I would go in and do the caption and blah, 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 okay? And then I would chew out the photographer for putting us in a bad position of having to use that photo. But let's take another photo that's a little bit more realistic that we might use. How does this photo look on first impressions?
Pretty decent.
Izzy.
So not much we're gonna be able to do about busy in the,
Needs to be cropped.
okay, so we could do something about busy, right? We could take our quick select, and I tell you, sometimes we could take our quick select tool and select the background and do filter, blur, Gaussian blur, and put it on about 15. And now it's not as busy. Oops, I burned his face. That's okay. That's all right. We just take the history brush and we history brush back to a point before that at 100%. I remember the use of the history brush. Now we bring his face back in. Right now, is that better, Stephen?
Not ethically.
Thank you. All right. So believe me, once your photographers learn how to do this, it's going to be really tempting to, I mean, it just doesn't take long, right? It doesn't take long to do a quick select on things and deselect things and add things to the selection and filter, Gaussian blur, and right. So just be careful about that because students will do it. And as we've seen, they will do it sometimes without your knowledge. All right. So not much we can do about busy. We could crop it. Who said crop it?
Alicia.
Alicia,
I did.
who would you crop it?
I was muted when I said it, but someone else said it.
I said it, but I'd crop out the girl and guy that are in there. I mean, I'd crop everything else out but them.
So you crop out the photographer?
Yep.
Okay. Thoughts?
I mean, what's the picture?
So that's kind of
for?
a good question to know. So this guy was starring in Greece as a college student and was being asked for his first autograph. And we have photographers documenting the event.
Awesome.
I don't hate him down
Story's
there.
even better than that, but I'll tell you the rest of the story later.
I think you have to crop him out because I don't like the decapitated lady.
So this is where you're gonna have to make choices, all right? But let's just assume that we've made that choice and move on, okay? So we're gonna leave it cropped the way it is just for the sake of the argument. What's next?
Color.
Okay, so let's grab our eyedropper tool, make sure it's set on 3x3, not 5x5, open up our info palette, make sure it's CMYK on the right-hand side, which is what it defaults to, K on the left-hand side, and if it's not K, it defaults to RGB, so you can change it to grayscale on the left-hand side. And then we move over to Tanner's face here, and what do we see? Same thing we're seeing. You start to see a pattern here, right?
I can't read it.
So E27, M55, Y79. So Y is 20 plus points higher than M,
Okay.
right?
Mhm.
So here's one thing I want you to watch when we do this one, right? Remember I told you there's many ways to get there. I still think the fastest way to get rid of yellow, if that's all you're doing, is just to use a photo filter and take that first cooling filter and start applying that cooling filter. Now, my question is his face the properly exposed skin tone in this picture?
Oh no, it's a tough one. It's hard for me to say that it would be underexposed.
I think his face is underexposed. I think his face is dark because of his baseball cap. I think the light from overhead is coming from up here and it's blocking his face a little bit because look at the brightness on his arm, right? So there's some kind, there's these four, you can see the reflection here,
The glare, yeah.
right? And so his face isn't getting lit as well as his arm and her arm. Because if I look at his arm, his K value is 43, but when I look at his face is 57, right? On the K side of things over here, right? So my point on this one is we have to be careful because initially, okay, it's pretty easy to get the M and Y. Look, we did it in one step. We did a cooling filter 25, and we checked Rob's head 31, 32. It's about the same. Arm,
Check the bald guy because
right?
the light could be.
35, 39 on his arm. Check his leg. 37, 32, 34, 36. His face, still a little yellow on his face, right? We're going to come back to that. All right. So we can also go too far because I want you to look at the blue stuff in the background. Here's after, here's before, right? So by adding all of that blue in there, we start to take out some of the richness of that stuff in the background. We have to assume that this is right because we're correcting for the skin tones, but you just have to be careful. When there's a lot of blue in the picture and you're using the blue filter, be careful about that. Okay, so, but if I look at the K value on this kid's name is Tanner, look at that, that's 59. That's 20 points higher than we said it was supposed to be. So we go to image adjust levels, and instead of using the highlights of the midtones, the highlights of the shadows, we use the midtones until we pull down his face. So that's 39, and he's as white as they come. So now we've got his, see why I think his face had to be in some sort of shadow? Because obviously that's wrong, right?
Mm-hmm.
Right, because now we've blown everything else. The numbers for everything else don't make sense, right? So my point here is be careful. Remember, I gave you these values and I said shoot for these values, but use a little bit of common sense too, right? Color correction, but we can fix this one pretty quick. Really, all I need to do here is take the dodging tool, right? Remember, the dodging tool makes things lighter, just like dodging in the darkroom. But if you've never been in a darkroom, Kevin and Melissa, then you probably don't know what the heck I'm talking about, right? Dodging
It's a foreign language to me.
Dodging makes things lighter, and burning, like burning down a house, makes things blacker. So burn it to make it darker, dodge it to make it lighter. And I have a tendency to use pretty large brushes with pretty low exposures because the effects are cumulative. So if I just dodge out that little bit there, I can keep making it lighter and lighter and lighter because the effects are cumulative, right? So that's why I prefer having a dodge tool that the exposure, it's not set at 100% because at 100%, I don't have a lot of control. If I set it at 50%, now it takes me twice as many strokes to get what I did before, but I gain control by doing that. So I tend to keep my dodging tool somewhere in the 25 to 30% range, and then I just go over it. And here's the way I teach my students this. All right, let's just look at Tanner's face, all right? And we're gonna pick some points on his face, say right there, right? It was 50, 55, 67. Now let's dodge it out a little bit. And we dodge it out using nice even circles. Then I check the value and I see it's 50, 60. So we went down a little bit. But the other thing I do is go back in the history palette and use my common sense. Right? Because I'm already feeling like I'm going too far. Right? As the person who shot the picture, I'm going, ooh, his face is already looking too light. Right? And so I can dodge out her face a little bit, and I can also burn in Rob's bald head over here if I want to. So here in 5 steps now, we started here and we're ending up here. Here to here to here to here to here. Here to here. Have we improved the quality of the picture?
Yes.
All right. And we've got our pretty much got our values to fit where we wanted them to fit. Right? We acknowledge that something's up with his face. So his K value over here is going to be higher than we would have liked it. But we got pretty good K values on his arms and legs and on Rob's head. Right. Well, now that we've darkened it. Right. And blah, 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 blah. Right. Thoughts, questions, gripes, concerns? Could you teach a student to do all that?
Some.
If you could teach me to do all that, you can definitely teach a student.
So my point tonight was we'd already learned the basic steps, but I wanted to add the common sense element to it. Right? You start combining things, and just remember the history brush, remember, takes us back in time. So the history brush is a great way. So I desaturated the tool, but remember, back in time, the color exists. No color, color exists. So if I start on the desaturated level, I can history brush back in to a different point in time, other levels. Or I can go to the color level and I can go forward in time to the desaturated level. Whoops. You get the idea, right? So the history brush is a very, very powerful tool for doing a lot of what we do. In fact, very, very rarely do I actually use the dodging and burning tools. I'm way more likely to use the history brush to accomplish that same effect because I have way more control with the history brush. Okay, now let's see. Lastly, I wanted to do poker spray. Not that one. Not that one. Ooh. Ah, there it is. Okay, now you guys get to drive. What do you want to do first?
Crop.
What do you want to crop? So Danielle's going to crop. What do you want to crop?
I would probably pull in on the right side and maybe a little bit up top.
Okay, so just one way, here's just to throw this out there, by the way. When I teach cropping, I think we've been teaching it backwards forever. I think we've been teaching people to crop in because that's the way the old cropper tools worked. And I actually think that's a bad idea. I think what we ought to be teaching is start with the center of visual interest and start going out, right? But I'm with you, Danielle. What you said, how far do you want to come in? Do you want his ear?
Probably maybe to like get rid of his hand.
Okay.
And then just down a little tiny bit on the top.
That much?
Maybe a little bit more. Just, I kind of want him I don't know. I want it a little tighter on him on the top.
Okay, so what I would be looking for is getting rid of that stupid cork thing up there. And from a balance perspective, you might go, I want the same amount of space above his head as I have on the side of his hand. So here, I like your thinking. You good with that?
Yep.
Okay. Why are we doing cropping first and not color correcting first?
Because you don't want to color correct something that you're going to get rid of.
Exactly. Why waste your time?
It's like dyeing your hair before you trim it.
Good analogy. A guy never would have thought of that. Right, Kevin?
Oh, nothing. Go ahead.
All right, somebody else. What's next?
Color.
So what do you want to do?
You could always tool like over his face to see where our values. His skin is a little red, but that also might be some of his skin tone. There is like, I think, a true white with his tag around him.
Even his true white tag is 5570.
Okay.
But what else was white in the picture? At least we think it was white.
The whiteboard, sort of.
And look at its values, 29, 28, 46. So,
Too yellow.
yeah. So what do we do?
Cooling filter.
Cooling filter is one way. I just want to see what happens. I haven't ever done this one. So auto color didn't help a whole lot. Auto contrast didn't help a whole lot, and auto tone didn't help a whole lot. All right, so here's an example, a perfect example of when auto is going to fail you. So go back to what I said tonight. Let's try this trick on this picture. Right? Yeah, I bet you photo filter is going to work, right? So we're going to come back to that. But let's try levels and doing our red, green, blue channel trick. Okay, it looks good in the red channel. It's a little bit off in the green channel, and it's going to be way off in the blue channel. Ooh, not so bad. Except I bet you that's all fake data right there. That's all fake data. Okay, teaching students about fake data is hard.
If you show Bradley, what I do is I show him to hold the Alt key
Yes.
where it shows both sides, and that helps a lot with showing fake data.
Wait, why is it not working?
When you click and hold the handles on each side of it, the black and white handles, and then you hold it, that's what it's always.
So see, there's his name badge right there. Here's the white down here, but it's not picking up the board. Oh, that's creepy. Okay. Okay. So we could try our little eyedropper trick. Oh, that took it too far. And look at that histogram, man. See how bad that histogram looks? You should recognize that as a bad histogram, even if you don't know what that means. That's a pretty more natural histogram. So when we did our little alt click trick, it identified this as white, and this is white, and this thing is white. So let's click on white and see if that helps. Not a whole lot. Not a whole lot. Not a whole lot. All right, so those tricks didn't work. We could try image adjust color balance, and we take out some of the yellow and take out some of the yellow. Right, and now we're going to be spending the next 10 minutes trying to figure out where we're going. Or we could do my way, my tried and true way of applying the cooling filter. Oh, look, in one step it works. Right? So at least we got something that appears to be, look at our CMYK values for the whiteboard. To be gray, CM and Y would be about the same. Right? And look at what they were before. They were 27, 29, 44, and now they're 30, 30, 25. right? So we've got the whiteboard at least better than we were before. His skin tones were 20, 57, 64, and now they're 24, 57, 46. So at least in that spot, one might argue that we've gone too far. It does look like we've gone too far. In fact, right there, it was better before than after. Oh, it was better before than after. Huh. So if it was better before than after, but we like the way the whiteboard looks, right? Because you said his skin looks a little red. Right? We could use the history brush at like 20% opacity. There's where it was before, there it is after. So I can bring back some of the yellow in his face. Oops, and I probably did too much. So I leave the whiteboard alone, but bring back some of the yellow in his face. And now look at our values, 24, 54, 51. Not bad. Okay, now what?
K values.
K values. So what do
Really
you want?
dark. And probably dodge his face in.
Could. I'm still betting, this is just, I'm betting that that whiteboard is still too dark, right? That K value for that whiteboard right there is 40%, right? If you put a 40% gray screen on top of type on a newspaper, it would be almost unreadable, right? So those of you that have been dealing in print for a long time, think of how dark 40% actually looks in the newspaper, right? 40% is pretty dark. Okay, so I'm probably going to go to my levels and look at my levels here. My level, I've got a good blacks. I've got good blacks in the blacks, good midtones in the midtones, but I don't have any whites except for that one spike right at the very end. It's fake. It always is. Right. And then there's nothing for a while. So I'm simply going to bring that slider down, maybe even further.
You can also hold Alt down on that, and it'll show you when the whites start to hold up.
Right. And you can, and you have to be careful with that, because what is it telling you? Right.
No data.
No data. Right. And sometimes no data is okay, like on his name badge, but down there on his shirt, it's problematic. All right. So let's go. Ooh, we don't, that's too far, because we definitely don't want no data in this. Okay. So let's say that that's okay, but we don't like what we did to his shirt. Right. So we like everything else. We like it the way it looks on the whiteboard. We like the way it looks everywhere else, but not in his shirt. His shirt got too white. In fact, if we go back to here, look at, there's a lot of data in his shirt that we've gotten rid of. Right. So what can we do?
Use the
History brush.
history brush.
Yeah. See, you're starting to think like me now. That's scary. Right. You can whoops. You can history brush his shirt back in. You can't go past the crop stage for the history brush. And so it was here, and we're down here. Here's, see how blown out his shirt is? And we're going to start bringing it back in. Probably should have not gone that far back. And I would probably want to do it a little bit to her hair too. But so in just a few steps, we've opened the picture, we cropped the picture, we adjusted the levels, we fixed the color balance of the entire picture, and then we started fixing the color balance of isolated areas of the picture. Boop. And we could do the same thing to his name badge too, by the way. Because see, his name badge has got, you can actually almost read his name in his name badge, but when we go down to there, it's gone. So we can history brush back in with a really small brush his name badge. Have we crossed an ethical line here?
No, because it was there. You're just putting it back.
Just be careful where that logic takes you. That's the logic that I use. Just be careful where that logic takes you. So here it was before. Here we are after. Okay, so that's what I got for doing all this stuff. You remember where the caption goes, right? File info. Put the caption information in there. Bob Coker's Burger teaches Happy First North Carolina. Oh, no, it wasn't first. That's the second North Carolina Collegiate Media Association Conference. Put the metadata in there. Once you've got the metadata in there, save the picture, give it a meaningful name. Teaching. JPEG, save in the right directory, save high res, go into InDesign. For color correction class, Bob teaching. Bob, it must be under B. Bob teaching. I don't know what you want to use. Why do I care? Links. Click on the links palette, captions, generate static captions, apply the style for the photo caption. Yes, I didn't put my name in there. Anyway. Questions?
Would you mind just saying out loud the last two steps, like with importing the caption and formatting it?
Sure, absolutely. So you have to click on the photo, and then on the links palette in Adobe InDesign, you've got the photo selected. Then you go to the little 4 bars in the upper right-hand corner, drag down to captions, and say generate static caption. And had I put my name in the author fields, it would have automatically come in, but I didn't. So I just apply the paragraph style of photo credit. And then I can go and delete my photo credit from here and add it up there. If that's how you do your photo credits. Does that make sense?
What's the difference between a static caption and a live caption?
Well, first of all, I'll tell you that Adobe and I have been working on this for the better part of 5 or 6 years now. And the answer to your question is that live caption doesn't work.
Okay.
It's a bug in the program. They acknowledge that it's a program. I've sent them all sorts of things. Here's what we want it to do, and it still doesn't work. Unless it's been fixed relatively recently. Let's see. Generate live caption. Nope, still doesn't work.
What's it supposed to do?
It's supposed to be a dynamic link where when I make changes to the photo caption in Photoshop in the metadata, it automatically changes the copy on the page. Not the other way around. It's not a two-way street, but it's a one-way street. Because this is actually, when you think about this, this is a huge workflow problem. We find a typo in the caption on the page, we fix it on the page, but we forget to go back and fix it in the metadata. And then the next time we want to use the photo, we forget about the typo and the typo runs. So that's a problem. Not that this is terribly important, but just so you know, you have to set up the captions. You can't, that doesn't just automatically work. I have to go in caption setup and tell it that I wanted to put the photo by and then the author field. And then on the next line, I wanted the description field. And now you wanted to apply the paragraph style of caption, which meant I already had to have my paragraph styles already set up. I wanted it to be below the image, 1 point offset. So that's exactly what you see. If I go back into my photo of Coker's Burger here, and I actually put my name in the author field, save, come back to InDesign. That link is out of date now. So I update the link. Now I do the exact same thing. Click on the photo. Click here, captions, generate static captions. And notice I put my name in there this time and the photo caption. So I just applied the style that I want to photo credit, and it applied it in the appropriate style. Window styles, paragraph styles. So it's in the style of caption. The credit is in the style of photo credit, and it's 1 point below the photo. See, it's 1 point below the photo, just like I told it to be. Save. Questions? Concerns, gripes, complaints? Should I turn off the recording so Lisa can't see the? Everybody say hi, Lisa.
Hi, Lisa. I'm sorry you're sick.
Stuff is going around, that's for sure.
What's your recommendation for when we put things in the newspaper when they, I mean, I know that obviously, or at least I switched the image mode to grayscale, but how much extra are you lightening it up for newsprint?
Great question. All right, because that is the next 3.5 hours of discussion. But let me give you the theory, right? And then I'll explain. There's a really easy answer to the question, but I'm going to give you the theory first because I know you're the kind of guy that's going to want the theory, right? If you take a Marks-a-Lot and you shove it up to a roll of toilet paper, what happens to the ink?
Bleeds.
It bleeds, right? And the same thing's happening when you're printing on glorified toilet paper. We just happen to call it newsprint, right? Newsprint has a huge amount of bleed, about 15%, right? So that's called the dot gain, and the dot gain for average newsprint today is about 15%, right? Yearbook, we don't have to worry about this, but there is a dot gain for yearbook, and it's about 3%. But 3% is kind of within our margin of error visually, so we tend not to worry about it too much, right? So there's a real simple, remember I told you, you save the basic copy, and now you've decided to use it in publication. So if we had decided to use this picture in our black and white newspaper, here's the steps that we would take. We would go image adjustments, desaturate, not black and white. Well, you can do this black and white, but don't do image adjust grayscale. It's a lot since I've done it. Don't do image adjust grayscale. Mode grayscale. Don't do that. That leaves you with lack of control. You can do image adjust black and white, or you can just do desaturate. I do like the black and white one because I can get more control over things, but I think most of my students just do desaturate. Once you've done desaturate, and you can see what it does to the yellows, and that's kind of problematic. Then you can go to grayscale. That removes the color in the proper way. But again, there's a whole other hour-long lecture in there about that, right? So we've got the image to black and white, but we don't have the resolution set for the newspaper. Oh, yes, we do actually. Looks like we were going to use this one in the newspaper, right? What I was expecting to see was that, right? So it's like it's straight out of the camera, right? So remember, for newspaper, our resolution, our lines per inch is about 65, 75, 85 lines per inch, right? So let's say it's 85. If it's 85 lines per inch, and you just have to ask your printer, 85 times 2 is 170, so you put in 170. I think ours was 160, which is why you saw 130 in there.
Now, another question. So does the image size really matter, like changing the resolution, if you're looking at the effective PPI anyway?
The answer is no, but what this tells my designers is this is the largest size I can use this in the newspaper.
And that's what I thought, because a kid asked me, like, why am I having to change this? And if I'm looking at the effective PPI anyway, and I didn't have an answer because I thought they were right. I just wanted to make sure that that's what it was.
Here's a quick way to illustrate why that matters. And our kids do this all the time, right? Ooh, I'm going to go to Facebook and we're using some social media stuff. And so I'm going to grab, God knows what we'll see on my Facebook, by the way. I'm going to grab this picture off of Facebook because we all know that that's legal, right? And so I'm going to grab this picture off of Facebook. Now you have no idea what's in this picture, right? You don't know anything about this picture. So the question is, how large can I use this in the newspaper? Well, the students, untrained students, and you've got trained students, right? The untrained students are going to click and they're going to go, oh, look, I can use this huge in the newspaper, right? Even though we look at the effective PPI as 72, right? But if, instead of doing it that way, if you taught them to go into the picture, crop it the way they want it to be cropped, and then do image size, make sure all three are linked together, 180 for newspaper. Now they would know that the largest size they can use that picture in the newspaper is 4.5 by 2.372. So that's one reason to do it. Quite frankly, my students have gotten out of the habit of doing it, except on the really big photos, you know, the double truck photos of the gigantic dominance in the newspaper. If that helps.
It did. I just wanted to make sure that I wasn't lying and saying that it actually didn't do anything when it did, but okay.
Yeah, no, you're right. Okay, so last step, get it to grayscale, change the resolution if you want to, right? I'm in grayscale, I changed the resolution, right? And then to compensate for dot gain, and this is simply a formula, right? And I'm trying to remember how we used it. I'm pretty sure we used 15 because we used 15% dot gain on that end and 5% on the white end. No, so 250. So we subtracted white. Now what you should see when you do that is it makes the picture look less contrasty, right? Because remember, pictures gain contrast as they go through the steps of reproduction, right? And so back in the day when I started, for example, we would have a negative that we shot film, we turned that into a print, we gained contrast. The print we made into a PMT negative and then a PMT positive, we gained contrast. And then a page negative and then a plate and we gained contrast. And then even on the press, you've got a negative and a positive, right? And in every one of those stages, it gains contrast. The blacks get blacker and the whites get whiter. So to compensate for that, we lower the contrast by a definable amount, right? In our case, it's about 15% dot gain. Right. And again, we don't worry about this in your book. We just don't. Right. But here's the cool thing about this. You can actually set this in InDesign when you do your PDFs. So you really don't have to worry about it, Stephen. You can, when you export your PDFs, so you just make your photos look good according to the numbers, right? And we color save the PDF. And then the output, we have convert to destination. And we tell it we want it to convert it to newsprint, dot gain 15%, if that's what your printer tells you. And then
I did not know the dot gain. That's really smart.
I don't remember where I said it. So now here's my pictures. Remember now they're calibrated for the press, not for my monitor. So you got to be a little careful. Those look so dark on my monitor, I would be a little worried, but not too much. Right, so the answer to the question there is you should be able to get, like, if you looked at my, let's see, actually here, PDF presets, export. Okay. I have a preset for, this is for CJET magazine. So that's Modern Litho is the name of the company, and they're printing at 600 PPI, and this was a preset designed in 2013. Okay. Here's my preset for all of the UIL copy editing tests, because I know those are going to be run on a photocopier. Okay. So I created a preset for this one. And then I have my own preset for my laser printer here in my office. So if you know, if your printer is any good, they're going to give you a preset. that does all of that for you. So you just do the numbers the way I taught you, and you don't have to worry about the dot gain. The preset takes care of that.
And would you, for black and white, would you convert the color to black and white first?
You don't have to actually. I do, and but I'm a little old school in that regard. I want control over that. I don't necessarily want control being turned over to the computer.
Well, and I've been making my kids do it. I just didn't know like if there was a trick like that that kind of made it better. But I think you're probably right with more control.
Yeah, I mean, in theory, right? So what I do for the UIL test, because I need a color version and a black and white version, is I just do it, I color correct for the color, and then I have a color preset and a black and white preset, and I let the preset take the color out of it. But
Now for color, do you do the same thing by reducing
yeah,
like if we're in Photoshop, what was the number again? I missed like how much.
You'd have to ask your printer, but
I mean, like in Photoshop, how much were you reducing? Like how much would you be reducing in levels to
for
to get
color
it?
picture, dot gain is dot gain is dot gain. It doesn't matter whether it's black and white or color.
Right, I was just saying I missed what number you
Oh,
used for yours.
I use 15, about 15 on the shadows in, and subtract 5 on the highlights in.
Okay.
But that's what I remember from RPress. And again, you'd be way better off. The preset would take care of this, or you can ask what the dot gain is. And if they tell you 15%, that should be pretty close.
Okay.
They might tell you values much. If they say dot gain of 30%, you got to be going, really? How old are your presses? Right. Dot gains of 15% are much more normal these days for black and white web printing. Good questions. And by the way, that's the kind of stuff that can earn you really good high-paying jobs. So if you leave teaching, you can go work for a printer now, because most people do not understand that stuff right there.